I would like to direct your attention over to that tall one growing under the eaves. So something I've noticed this year about poke is it's like probably a foot taller than kind of like normally what I see. And lots of berries coming on this year, and coming on early. Look at all the berries coming on already. It seems like things are coming in hot and heavy this year, and lots of them, and coming in a little bit early. So I guess the only thing that I would add to this, I thought they forgot that it's 9 o'clock on Sundays.
I'm on time at 9:30.
You know, poke is actually receiving a bit of research as a cancer drug.
Breast cancer.
Especially breast cancer. You're right, and lymphatic cancer, certain kinds of lymphatic cancers, because it's such a good lymph mover. And anytime there's like infection in the body and the lymph needs to move into the area, those drop doses of poke can be indicated. So it doesn't, it could just be any kind of like infection.
How do you use, which part, what do you use on it?
The
For
root.
instance.
Oh.
Use the root, unless you're doing a poke salad. But the poke salad, you only want to do in the beginning of the plant's life when it's no higher than your knee, and you just want to use the top, little babies. But you have to cook it 3 times, and change the water every single time you do it.
I don't think
and
I'll
there's
be
like a
doing
poke
that.
salad kind of
Right.
culture.
I like using the berries. I have used the root, but I think the berries are easier to get your dosage on and be less concerned about overdoing it, where the root is just tremendously stronger, and you do have to be cautious with your dosages on that. So I think it's going to be a lymphatic winter.
I have a lot of this growing in my yard.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
It's
We have a
just
giant-
everywhere this year.
Giant poke in our
So Phyllis, do you teach her the poke
Okay, that's
berries
what I
instead of the root?
I do.
Cool. Do you sift through the seeds at all, or?
Well, I tincture the poke berry. Sometimes I'm kind of like squish them and strain them through a cloth and then tincture the juice.
Okay.
But you don't want to press the berry,
You don't want to press the berry.
because if you squish the seed, then you're releasing, because it's a seed that's poisonous
Yeah.
inside the berry.
So if you don't macerate the seed at all, then you're fine.
Yeah. So
that's-
you can like tincture the whole berry and just strain that out, but you strain it, not press it. Because if you press it, you'll squeeze out. You can squish the seed.
Is there any danger in the tincture destroying or breaking that seed down at all? The alcohol
Not
at all?
any that I'm aware of,
I'm just curious about that.
because it's just really hard.
Uh-huh.
So as a matter of fact, traditionally, you swallow a seed whole, because it comes out the digestive tract the same way it went in. And if our digestive juices
Don't do it. Yeah.
can't break it and get into it, I'm not too concerned about the alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay?
So while it's in berry, you could take that as medicine, just pop a berry in.
Yeah, the traditional spring cleanse, not spring cleanse, the traditional cleanse, wasn't spring, the greens were the spring cleanse, berries were cleansing later, are for arthritis is 1 berry the first day, 2 berries the second day, 3 berries the third day, 4 berries the 4th day, 5 berries the 5th day, the 6th day, 4 berries, the 7th day, 3 berries, and you work your way down the same way you came up.
That's so interesting because we get something called a Medrol dose pack. Were you thinking of that too, Deb?
What I was thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. A Medrol dose pack that doses up and down like that too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when you were saying that, I thought that sounds just like a Medrol dose pack, which is a steroid basically for arthritis and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
All right, well, that's what the old folks did when I was growing up. They would just swallow the berry whole, and then, it doesn't really have the accumulative injurious effect that it could have otherwise. Because poke won't initially bother you. The poke phytochemicals that are poisonous to us don't initially bother you, but they accumulate over time. And they accumulate in the joints first. and it can actually cause the arthritis if it's used inappropriately, that people would take the berries to treat. Right? And then it'll accumulate, and then it'll bother the lymph system if you poison yourself with it. But it's not an initial poisoning. So I was at an herb conference once, and these young girls were saying, "Oh yeah, we just picked the poke greens and ate them raw." And I'm like, "No!" We went through the whole thing about the poisonous aspect of the poke greens, and they said, "But I've never felt any effect from it. It's never bothered us." And I said, "But it's accumulative. It's not going to get you now, but if you continued in a year, you could have liver failure. All of a sudden, from the accumulation. But if you stop now, your body will release. You won't accumulate anymore. Your body will deal with what has been stored, and you should be fine." So it's, this is a situation where I think it's really important to follow those traditional use guidelines that have been in place for hundreds and hundreds of years, because they got it figured out. Not based on, scientific discovery of crystalline phytochemicals that injure your joints, but just because they figured it out. And it was probably, truthfully, the Native Americans that figured it out, because the settlers learned this from the Native Americans. This is how you do it so it's useful and not harmful. Right?
You ever dry the berries, like harvest them and then
I have
dry them?
dried some berries, and then reconstituted them later, but I still don't want to squish the seed. And the seeds are so tiny. One time I tried drying them to see if I could just get the seeds out that way easier. It was way too much work.
They're really small.
Yeah, they're really small. They're really small and really hard. So it was like, to me, it was more work than it was worth. It was just easier to tincture and then just kind of drip it through a cheesecloth. And you can kind of like twist the cheesecloth to get it out, but you don't want to break it up. And the same with elderberry. Although the elderberry seeds aren't as toxic as poke seeds, I still just twist those and not squish them, because you don't want to squish elderberry seeds either. Any questions on poke?
When do they turn red here for you?
Normally I would say about September, but these look like they're going to be ready in July. I mean, these are green already and pretty good size, and I'd say by the end of July they're probably going to be red. So we'll leave it and we'll keep an eye on it, but traditionally, August. Traditionally kind of like even into September, October, you can still have pokeberries. So once they come on, they'll keep coming on until frost. Pokeberries don't all ripen at the same time. They'll ripen. Some will be, you can see, this one bush has some that are ripening and some that are still just forming. So.
And they're purple when they're ripe.
And they're very purple when they're ripe, and they're very soft, and they're very squishy. And they make great war paint.
Oh,
I don't remember
should
that.
you not take it, or I was reading that you should take it longer than 2 weeks.
Right? It is an acute remedy, and it is not a tonic, so you cannot you're not supposed to take it over long periods of time unless, there's something unique going on like cancer. And it is used in cancer remedies, herbal cancer remedies, over the long term, but usually with other herbs. It's not the only one. There was an herbalist I talked to, I guess, 2 years ago at International. And he had been using poke with his father, who had lymphatic cancer, and for 2 years. And the lymphatic cancer totally gone away, but they were afraid to stop the poke, so what if it is just a remission and it comes back? But he was only doing like 1 or 2 drops a day, and had been doing it that long. I don't know, it'd be interesting. He's going to be at International next year, and it'd be interesting to see.
1 or 2 drops of tincture.
Yeah.
Okay.
The root tincture?
They were using root tincture. Now I think you could use the berry tincture longer because it's not as strong.
If you did a berry tincture like the drop, would you want to work it up and work it back down?
You could, if you wanted that cleansing effect. But also I think the berry tincture not being as strong, that you could probably do the berry tincture in those low dose drops. You could probably do those for like 3 or 4 weeks because there's just not as much active ingredient in it. I mean, hey, I've talked to people whose grandmothers made poke jelly and they had it every morning for breakfast their whole lives, on hot buttered biscuits. So, the berries, if you take the seeds out, are medicinally active, a lot weaker, and were used as food. So that tells you there's a safety kind of factor built into the berries that you're not going to get in the roots. Yeah, one of my herb students once, she said, for my whole childhood, there was muscadine jelly, there was strawberry preserves, and there was poke jelly. And it was just on the table with a hot buttered biscuits like anything else. To me, there's this acidity flavor to poke, eating either the berries. The berries are sweeter, obviously, but either berries or the leaves, there's this acridity that some people don't really like, and I only like myself in small doses. It's not something I would want to eat all the time. And it's not acidity, it's acridity. So you can eat. Anybody had poke salad? Well, maybe next year, y'all will be here when we have the poke salad festival, because the restaurants in town serve poke salad.
When is the festival?
It's in May, and I can't remember if it's the second weekend or the third weekend. And it's like cheap crafts on the streets. Right? Yeah. A street dance and poke salad everywhere.
We'll have to do a field trip.
Field trip.
Yeah.
And t-shirts that says, I ate poke salad in Alabama.
Sometimes, it'll show up all year round kind of in garden beds.
It will.
Just little weeds, You take those little seedlings anytime during the year.
If there's no red on the stalk, it's tradition.
So if there's red on the stalk, you don't want the leaves?
Not to eat. Even if they're this big, there's already too much chemical in it for phytochemicals.
I thought that was rhubarb when I first saw it growing here. Because I didn't know
I
what
hope you didn't
rhubarb
make a
looked
pie
like
out of
either.
it.
I even had a red
I can
thing.
see
I
that
thought,
red
oh, I got
stalk.
rhubarb.
You ever use it externally?
Yes, I have, on breast
you
tissue,
can grow it.
especially. Traditionally, it
It
was
grows
used
wild
over swollen lymph nodes,
Does it?
topically over swollen lymph nodes,
Oh, no.
or anytime there was necrosis of tissue.
They grow it up.
Like, you could, if there was necrosis, like with even a brown recluse bite,
Okay.
you could mix a little poke in with plantain, and that would, help relieve that necrotic tissue. So there is a history of topical use, but be aware that phytochemical still will go through the skin and build in the system. The skin doesn't stop it.
Is there an herb that works well with the poke buildup in your joints or to release that?
Kidney herbs, because it's a crystalline,
Okay.
and in poke, affects the kidneys. It affects the livers. It can cause kidney failure and liver failure in toxic amounts. So I think it's good to know the strong herbs and be respectful of them and know that they have their place and they have their uses and they had traditional use. But we have to be respectful of them and not use these strong herbs like they were peppermint.
Yeah.
They're for special situations with limited runs and smaller doses. Of course, unless you're in a life-threatening situation. Any questions on poke?